In this iMovie, I am going to look at authorship attribution and showing how it is used with relation to a real-life case. So firstly, what is forensic linguistics? Well, John Olson states that it is the analysis of language that relates to the law, either as evidence or as legal discourse. Language in evidence includes the attribution of authorship and the interpretation of meaning. So what does authorship attribution actually mean? Well, Patrick Huala states that authorship attribution is the science of inferring characteristics of the author from the characteristics of documents written by the author. So in simpler terms, attributing the author of a given text by looking at the characteristics the author usually uses. So let's think about how this can be related in forensic terms. Texts can be falsified in another person's name. In specific, when a crime has been committed, a way of hiding the crime would be to pretend to be the victim to hide your tracks. And this is when forensic linguistics becomes important. We can solve crimes by looking at forged texts, and this is a way of the perpetrator covering up their crime. I am going to focus on a case where forensic linguistics was paramount in solving the crime.
This street in Stoke-on-Trent was the scene of a house fire that back in 2009 shocked the local community. When the fire brigade arrived, they discovered a father and two children had escaped the blaze, but tragically the mother had died. Through tears, Christopher Burks explained to firefighters how he had saved his two children and battled the flames to try and rescue his wife Amanda from the loft bedroom, but it was to no avail. She had died in the blaze. But, like the recent high-profile Philpott case in which 6 children died, when the emergency services started to investigate the fire, certain things just didn't stack up.
Suspicions were raised when the police found Amanda's body in an unnatural position. This raised the alarms to whether the fire had actually caused Amanda's death, or if it was a more in-depth case. Could this be an actual murder? Who has committed the crime? Amanda's mother had texted her on the 18th of January as she was concerned as to why Amanda had not been in contact. The text she received back was not normal to what Amanda would normally say. Alarm bells ringing anymore? Forensic inspectors concluded Amanda's death was not caused by the fire. This was just what the police officers needed to carry out further inquiry. Looking more in depth at the case led the police to employ forensic linguist Dr. Tim Grant from Aston University to investigate these suspicious text messages supposedly sent the day of the fire. To investigate whether a text has been forged, we need to look at the victim's texts before the crime, which gives us something to compare to. In this case, Dr. Grant compared Amanda's text previous to the crime and during. When looking at a text, there are numerous factors to look at, with relation to linguistic variations in forged texts compared to that person's own text. Things to look at include MLU, formality, text style and natural language choices, and spelling abbreviations. Dr. Grant looked at Amanda's text messages and analysed specific consistencies she uses. A large amount of data is needed to enable a correct average to be calculated. This deducts any chance of anomaly. He also collected around 200 text messages from Christopher Burke. This enabled him to see Christopher's usual text style. Once he found anomalies from both, Dr. Grant was then able to produce a database containing Amanda's text consistencies. He was then able to look at Amanda's texts supposedly sent at the time of the fire and see if they match up with what Christopher usually says. Firstly, 2 text messages sent spark suspicion that Christopher may have in fact pretended to be Amanda. Both of the following messages were sent from Amanda's phone on the day of the fire. The first text message Dr. Grant looked at was the following: "Not sure yet, I'm just talking with Chris." It was noted that "just" and "with" are both stylistic factors to the way Chris texts. Amanda has never actually used these language abbreviations in her texts before. The second text message which sparked suspicion was the following: "Don't know, need think, I'm going relaxing bath, then go sleep, really tired." The use of the abbreviation "don't" is also stylistic to Christopher. He only spells it in this way, in comparison to Amanda, who Dr. Grant says only spells it D-O-N''T. In fact, she has never used an abbreviation for this word in any of her previous texts. "15 texts were sent the day of the fire, all of which had resemblance to the exact way Christopher texts. This gave enough evidence to conclude Christopher was in fact acting as Amanda. With this amount of linguistic evidence building up against Christopher, it was enough to sentence him to 19 years in jail. The police concluded that Christopher had killed Amanda earlier on the 18th of January, pretended to be her via text messages to lessen suspicion, then set the house alight later that evening in the hope of it looking like an innocent house fire, which resulted in Amanda's tragic death. In the case of Christopher Burke, the significance of forensic linguistic research was key to solving the crime. It enabled us to piece together the abnormalities in which were noted during the crucial stages of the inquiry. Forensic linguistics is sometimes paramount in solving a crime. If text messages hadn't have been investigated, then Christopher Burke may have got away with murder, and the crime would have stood as Amanda dying in a house fire. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.